Go. 3, 2, 1. Hi there. My name is Danny Henderson, and welcome to my beautiful channel. My guest today is somebody that I've been following since 2020. I was actually trying to come aboard one of his vessels, one of his many vessels, because he is commander of a huge fleet. His name is Captain Paul Watson. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you.
It's so good to have you. I've been gushing and telling you how excited I am. I get excited for all of our guests, but honestly, it's such a pleasure to have you because I see you as the greatest, goodest modern day sea captain, pirate, and we've got so many stories to share about your background. But let's start with you in 1969 when you first started to become an activist for the oceans of our world.
I had previous experience in the Norwegian Merchant Marine and also the Canadian Coast Guard. And in 1969, there was a demonstration on the Canadian-U.S. border, British Columbia and Washington State, where the Sierra Club partnered up with the Quakers to do this demonstration. It was against nuclear testing in Amchitka Island in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. And out of that demonstration, we decided to have more meetings, and we formed a group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee. And the reason it was called that was because people still remember the tsunami that hit Vancouver Island from the 1964 Anchorage earthquake. So at the Don't Make a Wave Committee meeting, the idea came up, okay, let's sail a boat up to Amchitka to protest the bomb. The Quakers had done it in 1956 to Bikini Island. And so that's what we decided to do. And at one of the early meetings, somebody left the meeting and flashed a peace sign. And Bill Darnell said, let's make it a Greenpeace. And Bob Hunter said, great name for the boat. So we named the boat that we got, the Phyllis Cormac, which is a fishing boat. We named it the Greenpeace. And they sent it up there in October of 71. And it had to come back because they delayed the atomic test. But then my boat, the Greenpeace 2, TOO, went up, and then they set the test a couple of days beforehand to prevent us from being there. But the great thing about it is it produced so much publicity that all further tests were shut down. So it was a very successful meeting. And then in 1972, we officially changed the name of the Don't Make a Wave Committee to the Greenpeace Foundation.
Beautiful. Before we get into the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, which is the fleet that you are commander of, I read that there was a club that you joined as a little boy, and you were a member of the Kindness Club. Now, as a father to two very tiny little boys, do you think that had an effect on you, or is there anything or anyone in particular that influenced your life growing up?
Well, it actually had a profound effect because when I was 8 years old, my mother signed me up to this group called the Kindness Club. It was led by Ida Fleming. She was actually the wife of the conservative premier of the province of New Brunswick in Canada. And she sent out this newsletter to children to get involved with protecting animals. Albert Schweitzer was actually the honorary president of this. So anyway, the incident that really changed my life was when I was 10 years old. I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers. And had a great time, and just me and the beavers. And then the next summer, when I was 11, I went back and couldn't find them. They were all gone, and I found out that trappers took them all during the winter. That made me quite angry. So that winter, I began to walk the trap lines and free the animals from the traps and destroy the traps. So I guess I've been doing the same thing for the last 60 years.
Incredible. Can you tell us how you decided to found the Sea Shepherd? And I love that. The Sea Shepherd, Shepherd of the Seas. How did you come up with the name, and what is it exactly?
Well, when I was with Greenpeace, I was, first made on the campaigns to protect the whales, but I led the campaigns to protect baby seals off of Labrador and Newfoundland. And in 1977, March of 77, a sealer was about to club a baby seal, one of these white coats. So I rushed ahead and I grabbed the club from his hand and threw it in the water and picked up the seal and took it to safety, which is what I thought I was there to do for. But Greenpeace hauled me on the carpet and accused me of theft and vandalism. You stole the man's property, you destroyed the man's property. And I said, yeah, but I saved the seal. And they said, well, we're all about is bearing witness. We don't intervene. I said, well, I sure as hell intervene. And so for that reason, they voted me out of Greenpeace. But that was okay. I set up the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society with a specific strategy, which I called aggressive nonviolence, and proceeded to go about getting our first ship. And actually, the money for the first ship came from two conservative organizations, the US-based Fund for Animals and the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the UK. And so they provided the funds. I got the ship, and from there on, I started to build up the fleet. Unfortunately, last year, there was a hostile takeover of Sea Shepherd. All those ships were taken away from me, and they changed the focus of it because I was too controversial. They were referring to me as the Watson problem. Too controversial, too confrontational. They wanted to change the direction to be more, let's work with governments, let's work with corporations. And I said, I can't support that. I don't have anything to do with that. And the guy who had led the takeover was a Florida property developer, actually looked at me and he said, "You're an employee, you do what you're told." And I said, "Absolutely not." So they offered me $300,000 a year just to shut up, post nothing, say nothing, and be an impotent figurehead for the organization. So I turned that down. And I immediately set up the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. And the reason I called it that is so they don't take my own name away from me, but actually they're suing me now, trying to take my name away from me, saying that my name's too intimately connected to their brand, as they call it, and that's causing confusion amongst their supporters. But fortunately, a lot of those supporters came over to continue to support me, and other Sea Shepherd groups like Sea Shepherd France, Sea Shepherd Brazil, Hungary are also supporting the foundation that I've set up. And Sea Shepherd UK actually changed their name to the Captain Paul Watson Foundation UK. So we're doing pretty good. After 1 year, we've got a couple of vessels. And we've done campaigns to Iceland, to the Faroe Islands, to Africa, to protect turtles. We're doing numerous campaigns. And so things are growing really fast. In fact, leaving Sea Shepherd to me was, very motivating and very inspiring because, for what happened with Sea Shepherd is what happens to all these other groups. It got too big. We had the Whale Wars TV show. It got too big. Next thing you know, the fundraisers, the lawyers, the accountants are taking over and begin telling everybody what to do and how, we're going to do it this way. We're not going to do it that way. And, to me, it was never about money. It was never about job security. It was about doing the things that needed to be done and advancing the philosophy of aggressive nonviolence, which is intervene aggressively, but don't hurt anybody. And I've not injured a single person in 60 years since doing this. And so I don't see what the problem they had with that, but apparently they said I was upsetting governments and corporations because of my actions. And one of the other problems, of course, is that things are different than they were in the 70s and the 80s. The laws are much more repressive now, and people are far more reluctant to get involved. And they're actually passing laws to prevent people from actually doing anything. So I think that scared a lot of people off, but it didn't scare the people who are supporting me now, and it didn't scare myself. And I always said fear has no place in this movement. You have to be willing to take the risks. I get criticized because people say, "Well, you're asking young people to risk their life to protect a whale. How can you ask young people something like that?" And I said, "Well, why? We ask young people all the time to risk their life, give their life for property and real estate and flags and religion. I think it's a far more noble pursuit to risk your life to protect an endangered species or a threatened habitat."
A far more noble pursuit indeed. And of course, we know that the governments largely are corrupt on our planet, organizations, and this is the time we're in, 2023, where we're seeing all the systems and governments collapse, and people like you, pirates of the sea, are keeping on, and gathering the tribes of the beloveds to help, to support, to protect the animal kingdom. I love it. Now, you mentioned Whale Wars as a TV show. I read and found so many things on you that I'm like, oh my gosh, is there going to be time to keep all this in our one conversation? But in the Whale Wars, can you tell us how you corrupted and infiltrated and interrupted on the ocean seas, whaling boats? What were some of the tactics that you used?
Well, I went to all the TV networks in the US and I said, look, the biggest show on Discovery right now is a bunch of men going to a hostile, remote, cold area to catch crabs. I can give you a show of men and women going to a colder, more remote area to save whales. It has to be more compelling than catching crabs every week. And Animal Planet Discovery went with the idea. And in 2007, we did our first series, and it lasted for 8 years. And what we did was directly intervene. And the Japanese whaling fleet is illegal. Everything it was doing was illegal. And that was actually determined to be illegal in 2014 by the International Court of Justice in The Hague. But they just ignore it, just like all these governments just ignore international regulations. But anyway, the idea was to very simple. All you have to do is block the slipway and put a ship right behind the factory ship. And if they can't load a whale, they can't kill whales. Now, we did a lot of other things, but they're more for the television show, like throwing stink bombs and water cannon fights and things like that. But the one thing that actually worked was blocking the slipway. And we were able to intervene and in 2007 and save like 10% of the whales, and then it went up to 30%. By 2012, 2013, we shut down 90% of their operations down there. The other thing that we did was intervene to prevent them from refueling the factory ship while it was at sea. It was aggressive. Nobody was hurt, but Japan had a lot of influence, and they went to the United States and brought me to court. And it was interesting because when they first brought this to court in Seattle, Judge Richard Jones, he said to the Japanese, "You come into my courtroom with unclean hands. You're in contempt of the Australian federal court, and you're coming into my courtroom to get to prevent us from intervening." He says, "I'm not going to give you that." And so, and we went ahead. We were ready to go. We're out there. Our ships have already left, and suddenly we get a notice from the Ninth Circuit Court that they're going to give them what they wanted, but they didn't give any reason why, and we'd already left. So then we were charged with 21 counts of contempt of a federal injunction, which is a serious charge. But when it came back, we were all charged with that. I went to court in Seattle, and Judge Peter Shaw, after listening to it, it cost about, fortunately, I had legal insurance because it cost $7 million to defend ourselves from this. And Judge Peter Shaw found us not guilty. And fine, that's great. But a year later, the Ninth Circuit Court overturned that verdict and found us guilty. And I never even saw these judges. And then they said that you're ordered to pay damages to the Japanese whaling fleet, which could have been $70–80 million. But this is where it got really strange. The Japanese whaling fleet didn't want damages, because to get damages, they'd have to open all their books and do some explaining, which they didn't want to do. So they just came back to us and said, "You don't have to pay damages, you just pay us our legal fees," which is $2.5 million. So we paid them the $2.5 million and then turned around and charged them with piracy in the U.S. federal court. Because they had brought it into court, they had to answer to it. And what did that mean? Now they have to open up their books. And they didn't want to do that. And so they were facing contempt charges. And we could have won and really hurt them bad, but it would have cost another $8 million. But what happened is we sat down and mediated with the Japanese whaling fleet and got an agreement that the injunction would stand against the United States only, but not against Australia, Great Britain, France, and the other Sea Shepherd groups. And they also gave us an undisclosed amount of money, which I'm not allowed to say how much it was, but it was certainly, compensated for what we had lost before. And so anyway, that's where that stood. And the other problem is that I was then put on the Interpol Red Notice. An Interpol Red Notice was put out for me on the most bizarre charge of all, conspiracy to trespass on a whaling ship. Now, the Interpol Red Notice was set out to go after war criminals, major drug traffickers, serial killers. I'm the only person in the history of Interpol to be put on that for conspiracy to trespass. And it didn't hurt anybody, didn't damage anything. And Interpol said, "Well, we understand your situation, but Japan really is the one that makes the decisions, and they want to keep you on that." So I was allowed to return to the United States when Secretary of State John Kerry ruled that it was all nonsense and let me in, and France had already let me in. So I can go between France and the United States. But for instance, if I were to set foot in the UK, I could be detained and extradited to Japan, and because of Julian Assange, I don't trust the UK, so I'm not going there.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is just so outrageous. And again, I'm so proud and honored to have you here. You mentioned Julian Assange. In my mind, we're watching a slow and deliberate murder of a man who only lived to tell the truth. And I feel like he's being slowly murdered to show us whether behind the scenes he's free, and please God he is. But if he isn't, I feel like the assholes that run the planet are telling everybody, people like you, do not go against our rules because this is what we'll do to you. And that element of fear has always persisted and dominated a majority in areas, different areas on the planet, to people not to use their voice or use their passion. Now, I read something about you that you wrote way back in like 2013, probably earlier, and it's probably been a grounded moral value that you've had. You spoke about speaking against the mainstream media and what you see them do, and you referenced Reagan. Do you remember that comment? Against the mainstream media?
Yeah, I mean, Reagan was a master media politician. He understood the media, and he also understood it doesn't matter what you say because it just gets into the front pages. So when people say to me that they disagree with what I'm doing, I say it doesn't really matter, because whatever you say is irrelevant. It's only actions that speak for themselves. And yeah, it's really hard to, I was fortunate when I was young. I was educated in communications at Simon Fraser University. And one of the guest lecturers that came was Marshall McLuhan. And Marshall McLuhan in the 70s and 80s was considered the guru of communications. He wrote The Laws of Media, the medium is a massage. And he said that we live in a media culture. The media works you over every day. It decides what you eat. It decides what you think. It decides everything. And he says, so in order to get around that, you have to be able to understand and manipulate the media to make it do what you want to do. Now, I really learned this lesson in 1977 when we brought Bridget Bardot to the ice floes to protect the baby seals. A picture of her cheek to cheek with a baby seal gave us the front cover of every major magazine in the world. She didn't have to do anything, just pose for a picture. We got that. 1984, I led a campaign to protect wolves in British Columbia, and we had the perfect campaign because there are 4 elements of media, and the 4 elements of media are sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. Every story has one of those elements. If you have more than one element, the story gets bigger. So on the wolf campaign in 84, we had the perfect story because we had the violence of them shooting wolves from helicopters. We had the violence of them threaten and shoot us. We had an environment minister who we proved was taking a bribe from the big game hunting organization. So there it was, violence and scandal. How did I fill that out? I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson. And at the press conference, a reporter for the Vancouver Sun said, come on, Bo Derek doesn't know anything about wolves. This is ridiculous having her as your spokesperson. I said, well, yeah, I know, but if I had the best wolf biologists like Gordon Haver or David Meck here, it'd be an empty room. I see this place is packed. You're going to write the story. It's going to be a headline on your newspaper tomorrow, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it, is there? Because those elements guarantee the story. And so that's something we learned a long time ago. The news in the media is first and foremost entertainment. That's what it's all about. They're not really concerned about facts and figures and everything. They're concerned about entertaining you. And the more controversial the subject, the more that they'll put it out. That's why Donald Trump gets so much coverage, because he's entertaining. It's not that he has anything intelligent to say, because he doesn't, but he's very entertaining. And that has been the history of it, really.
Incredible. Can you take us back to 1980 when you got arrested?
Which one was that? 19 arrested.
Best pirate on the seas ever. This was a seal hunt, the seal hunt protest, 1980.
Oh, right. 79. It was actually 1979
Okay,
and again
well,
in 1983. And 1983 was a fun one because Canada passed special regulations. The regulations are called the Seal Protection Act. Under the Seal Protection Act, it's illegal to photograph, film, videotape, or approach or even witness a seal being killed. If you see a seal being killed, you've just broken the Seal Protection Act. So we went in 1983 and deliberately broke the Seal Protection Act, and I blockaded St. John's Harbor. I didn't let the sealing fleets out. I chased sealing boats out of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and we were arrested. They spent $1.5 million coming after us. An RCMP SWAT team brought us into court. They brought us all to Nova Scotia, but the Crown prosecutor didn't want to charge us, so the Mounties put us two Mounties to each of a crew, there's 20 crew and 40 Mounties, took us in a troop transport plane to the province of Quebec to put us on trial before Judge Yvonne Mercier, who was called the hanging judge of the seal hunt, because we knew we were going to be guilty. So what are we going to do about that? I decided the strategy would be to be as hostile to this judge as possible, to really, really piss him off. And that's what we did. And he got really angry, and he found us guilty, which we knew he was going to do. He gave me 15 months for conspiracy to break the Seal Protection Act, 6 months for breaking the Seal Protection Act, $75,000 fine, confiscation of my ship, every crew member fined $4,000. I was told not to talk to any journalists on any subject anywhere in the world for 3 years, and I was denied entry to half the Canadian provinces, of which, one of which I was had lived in. So that was great. That's exactly what we wanted, because I went to prison in Quebec, and 9 days later, I was out of prison on appeal. And the Quebec Court of Appeals just took one look at this and said, what is this all about? You don't get 21 months in prison for approaching a seal hunt. And so the whole thing was thrown out.
Wow, that is just so remarkable.
If we hadn't been hostile, we would have probably got, like, 7 or 8 years, maybe it could, or I mean 7 or 8 months, I think, and made major fines. But then I turned around and sued the Canadian government for the damage they did to my ship, and they had to pay me.
Excellent, excellent, good win. It's so lovely. What we're doing is, this is what we call disclosure. You are disclosing the true history from the 70s to current day on what you've witnessed, what you know, the corruption, the evil, the different countries that lie and say, no, we're animal-loving countries, and we know they're not. And so we're getting the greatest information from you. Can you tell us about the ship?
I'll just add one thing that's happening right now. In June, when we arrived in Iceland, within hours of our arrival, the Minister of Fisheries canceled the whale hunt until the end of August. That was okay. But then the whaling, the guy who owns everything, the wealthiest man in Iceland, Christian Lofsson, he then threatened to take down the government. He is taking down the government right now for not getting what he wants. And he's organizing the Independence Party, which he has great influence in. But here's the thing that really why I don't like politicians, no matter what their party is. The coalition that was responsible for putting that temporary ban in, with a very courageous fisheries minister, that coalition is going to be broken up because the Green Party of Iceland is supporting the whalers. Who would have thought the Green Party, which has been against the whale hunt for years, is now turned, because, political deals, backroom deals. This is what politics is all about, selling out everything for personal benefits. And that's why, I mean, in the United States, there's two political parties. I call them the Republicrats and the Demopublicans, for pretty much the same thing.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And also the other thing you're mentioning, Julian Assange, how could he be charged with treason in the United States? He's Australian, and how can he be held in the United Kingdom without being convicted of a crime? I mean, that's tyranny, is what it is.
It is tyranny. It is. Before we move to the ship, the Steve Irwin, let's go into what you've witnessed and the countries and the uses created to harm our animals, our mammals, our sea life. Can you just give us some stories of some of the whaling, some of the atrocities that you've seen?
Well, I think that we've made a lot of progress over the last 50 years, because when I first began, I think that since then, about whaling has been reduced by 90%. The countries that have stopped whaling are Australia and Chile and Peru and South Korea and Spain, and all of these were whaling countries that are no longer whaling countries. And we shut down all the pirate whaling operations. I rammed one, sunk one, and sunk a couple in Norway or whatever. But probably one of the most aggressive ones was in 1985. I took my ship to Iceland and said that I'm not going to do anything this year, but next year, if you break the International Whaling Commission's moratorium on commercial whaling, we're going to come back and we're going to sink your ships. And of course, next year, the moratorium took effect. Iceland continued killing whales. So in November of '86, we sank half the Icelandic whaling fleet at dockside in Reykjavik and destroyed the whale processing plant and shut them down for a number of years. Now, that might seem illegal, to sink these ships in Reykjavik Harbor. And I sent messages, letters, at the time, and I said, what are the charges? What are you charging me with? Didn't get any response. In January of 1988, I got on a plane and flew to Reykjavik, told them I was coming. I was met at the airport by the chief immigration officer and quite a few police officers.
Mm.
And the chief immigration officers, how long do you intend to stay in Iceland, Captain Watson? I said, I don't know, 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 years. Why don't you tell me how long I'm going to stay here in Iceland? Well, we'll have to go to interrogation. It's a great idea. Let's go to interrogation. Are you admitting to sinking these ships? Yes. And we're going to sink the other two at the first opportunity. Instead of charging me, they took me to the airport, put me on a plane, and sent me back to New York City. And the next day, the Minister of Justice says, who does he think he is? He comes into our country and demands to be arrested. Get him out of here. They knew that to put me on trial would be to put themselves on trial for their illegal activities. That's the way you challenge illegal operations by governments, is you have to, it's what Gandhi did. You put the government on trial by putting yourself on trial and using that as a forum. And I think that's the only way you can really make a difference, because you're up against, governments have a monopoly on violence. They have absolute total control. And the only way to get around that, I mean, you can't violently oppose them, but the only way to get around that is to outmaneuver them philosophically. And to me, the greatest weapon in the world, the most powerful weapon in the world is the camera. And that's what we go into battle with cameras, and record absolutely everything on that. And occasionally we get the cameras taken away from us or smashed or whatever, like in Canada, that happened quite a bit. But we always sometimes manage to get footage out. We hide it in snowbanks or hide it on the ship or on ourselves. And so we managed to get that evidence out. It's a real struggle in that way. But I have always operated within the boundaries of the law and of practicality. I don't have a criminal conviction for any felony anywhere. In 2010, I was invited by the FBI in the US to give a lecture. They paid me to give a lecture in Quantico. And at the lecture, I gave the lecture. And at the end, one of the special agents said, well, Sea Shepherd's walking a pretty fine line when it comes to the law. And I said, yeah, but does it matter how fine the line is as long as you don't actually cross the line? And they couldn't disagree. And then one of them says, yeah, well, you're educating and creating eco-terrorists. I said, really? Like who? They said, well, Rod Coronado. I said, Rod Coronado? He got arrested for freeing mink from a mink farm. Is that what you call eco-terrorists? And I said, besides, he did that 5 years after he crewed with me. It had nothing to do with me. And the FBI agent said, you trained him, you're responsible. And I couldn't resist it. I said, I got 4 names for you: Timothy McVeigh, Lee Harvey Oswald, Muammar Gaddafi, and Osama bin Laden. You trained them. They actually laughed. They actually laughed at that.
Wow. That's
But the secret is you don't do any, you take responsibility for everything you do. You be transparent about everything you do. That's really all you can do, so they don't get you on, what is it, sedition or conspiracy or things like that. I got arrested in 1993 off the Grand Banks in Newfoundland for chasing the Spanish and the Cuban drag trawlers off of the nose and tail of the Grand Banks in Newfoundland. Canada spent $2 million coming after me with planes and ships and everything, chasing us around. I didn't damage anything, didn't hurt anybody, but I was charged with 3 counts of criminal mischief. That's what they do when they can't get you on conspiracy. And criminal mischief, I was told 2 counts endangering life, 1 count endangering property. I'm facing 2 times life in prison, plus 10 years for that charge. So I was brought into court, into the most, the province where everybody hates me because of the seal hunt. They're all supporters of the seal hunt. But because I interfered with the fishing operations, now the fishermen like me. And for the strangest thing, I had actual fishermen picketing outside the jailhouse where I was being held, demanding that I be released, because I was fighting fisheries that the Canadian government was doing nothing about. So anyway, we went to court and we had a jury. And, I always said the thing with juries is that the jury either likes you or don't. They don't care about the evidence. Either like you or they don't. But before that, I called a friend of mine who's a lawyer in Vancouver, and I said, who's the best damn lawyer in Newfoundland? He said, Brian Casey. He got those priests up on the orphanage scandal. Well, that sounds like he knows what he's doing. So he was my guy. The guy was an artist. He was total. He got in front of the jury and he said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm not going to say we didn't do what we're charged with. We're going to say that we did exactly what we're charged with. We're proud to have done it, and we're going to do it again. That was our opening defense, and I was acquitted. My defense was actually the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows for individuals and organizations to intervene to uphold international conservation law. That's the World Charter of Nature that was passed by the UN in 1986. Now, they brought in a University of Toronto law professor to argue it had no application in Canadian law, so therefore it was irrelevant. And the judge said, "Did Canada sign this?" And she said, "Yeah, but Canada signs a lot of things." And the judge said to the jury, "If Canada signs it, you have to take it into account." So that was the basis of my defense. Oh, sorry, I better let that go.
Unreal.
Sorry.
Can you tell us about some of the beauties that you've witnessed? I know there's too many to share in one broadcast, but some of the beautiful whales and dolphins and sea life. Share with us some of the things that have just touched your heart and your soul, please.
Well, of course, many opportunities to swim with seals underwater, to swim with whales and dolphins and that. The one thing that well, there's a couple of things where I've had very close relationships with whales off the coast of British Columbia in the Straits of Bella Bella back in 1975. There was a pod of orcas coming towards us down through the strait, and three of us, for some strange reason, we decided to jump in the water in front of them because, hey, whales are very beautiful. They're not going to hurt you. And at that time, people thought they did. And the only thing more intimidating than a pod of orcas coming straight towards you is a pod of orcas that suddenly disappears and they went under the water. And so we didn't know where they were. And all I'm thinking is, these guys eat sea lions. They're bigger than us. And suddenly the pod surfaced right beside us. And for some reason, I reached out, grabbed the dorsal, and got pulled through the water by this orca for about 200 meters. Now, you don't walk up to a lion in the Serengeti and pet it on the head, but here is the most powerful, formidable predator on the planet just allowed me to ride along. And I don't think it's because they like us. I think they're intelligent to know what we are. And they'd rather live in a state of mutual respect rather than get on our bad side, because we're a very, very dangerous species. But the one thing that really solidified my concern for doing everything I can to protect them was that, and again in 1975, we'd come up with this idea to protect the whales by putting ourselves between the harpoons and the whales. And Robert Hunter and I were in a small little inflatable boat, and there was a Soviet harpoon vessel bearing down on us. This is in the Pacific, and 8 sperm whales fleeing for their life in front of us. And every time the sperm whales, every time the harpooner tried to get the gun on us, I would maneuver the boat to block him. And this worked for about 20 minutes until the captain on the Soviet vessel came down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner. Then he looked down at us, smiled, brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I realized, Gandhi isn't going to work today on this one because, putting on whatever. And a few moments later, there was an incredible explosion, and the harpoon flew over her head and hit a female in the pod. And she screamed and rolled on her side, a fountain of blood. And suddenly, the largest whale, this big bull, hit the water with his tail, with like a clap of thunder, swam right underneath of us, threw himself up at the harpooner on the bow. And they were ready for him with an unattached harpoon, hit him point blank in the head. He fell back in the water, screaming in agony. There's blood everywhere. And as he was thrashing about on the surface, I caught his eye. And now I saw him turn and dive again. This time I see a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight at me real fast. And he comes up and out of the water at an angle. The next move to come down, crashing down on top of us. And as his head rose up out of the water, and I looked into this eye, the size of my fist, an eye so close, I saw my own reflection in that eye. He did something completely strange, and that is he made an effort to pull himself back. And I saw his body go sliding back into the sea as I disappeared beneath the surface, and he died. He could have killed the two of us in that boat, but he chose not to do so. And so I owe my life to that whale. But I also, as I was sitting there, I've had this feeling that of pity by the whale, not for himself, but for us. Why were we killing them? We were killing sperm whales not to eat them. We were killing sperm whales for spermaceti and sperm oil, which is highly prized as an industrial lubricant. And one of the things it was most highly prized for was for the lubrication of intercontinental ballistic missiles. I said, here we are, killing this incredibly intelligent, sentient, self-aware, wonderful, beautiful creature for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. I said, we're insane. So from that moment on, I said, I'm not doing this for people. I'm doing this for them. They're my clients and that. So in '86, when we sank half the whaling fleet in Iceland, I had a former colleague from Greenpeace who came up and he said, just want to know that what you did in Iceland was despicable and you're an embarrassment to the entire movement. I said, yeah, so? He says, aren't you concerned about what people think of you? I said, no, not at all. I don't really care. We sank those whaling ships for the whales, John. Find me a whale that disagreed with what we did. I promise you we won't do it again. But quite frankly, I don't really care if everybody on this planet is opposed to what we did. We didn't hurt anybody and we saved lives. And that's really what it's all about.
Wow. Wow, that's such a moving story that you just shared. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the work that you do and who you be as a man on this planet, as a pirate, as a captain. There could never be enough words to thank you for your passion. And I know that you're going to ignite people that watch this, and we'll put details underneath of how people can connect to the foundation and connect with you. But I wanted to go back and ask you about the ship named the Steve Irwin. Now, is it the same Steve Irwin that we came to love as an animal conservationist in Australia that lost his life?
In the first Whale Wars episode that we did, I invited Steve to join the crew. So he was going to be the crew on that campaign. But then a couple of months later, he died, in that accident. So I asked Terrier if she would like to, if we could name the ship after him. And that would go a long way, and because we were operating out of Australia, so we wanted to really, focus on Australia as the country that was leading the effort against whaling. So she actually christened the vessel with a bottle of wine in Melbourne, and then we set out and that. So yeah.
That is beautiful. Thank you. I wanted to know. And again, you disclosing everything, you're giving us such an education, opening the minds of those that wonder about these things, or maybe they've heard something, but you're giving your true detailed testimony. And there's nothing better than that, is there? There's nothing better than that from the mouth of the person who's lived and experienced. Gosh, so much to ask you. There's so much here. I wanted to just briefly touch upon you got involved in the shark finning boats. So we'll talk about shark finning, what that is, and how you also disrupted the whale meat factories, please.
Which ones? Sorry.
Pick a country that does whale meat production and off you jolly well pop.
Well, shark finning is the removal of the fins of the shark, because the shark takes up too much room and the shark itself is not valuable, but the shark fins are valuable. So they bring the sharks on board, slash off the fins, throw the animal back, sometimes still alive when they do this. I found a Costa Rican vessel off the coast of Guatemala that was shark finning inside Guatemalan water. So I called the Guatemalan government and I said, what should we do? And they said, can you stop them? I said, sure, I can stop them. And I did so at the invitation of the Guatemalan government. And we did stop them. But when they got back to port, they said to the Costa Rican government that I had tried to kill them, which wasn't true. But fortunately, I had Rob Stewart was on board making the film Shark Water about sharks. So he filmed everything. But anyway, I was charged with 8 counts of homicide and attempted homicide and brought into court. But we showed the film and they dismissed the charges and let me go. And a week later, they came on board and charged me with 8 counts of assault. And again, we went to court, showed the film, and they let me go. And then I was given clearance to leave. So I never thought anything of it for 10 years until I arrived in Germany in 2012. And the German government arrested me on a detention order from Costa Rica for a thing called shipwreck endangerment, but nobody even knew what it was. But apparently what happened is Japan had leaned on Costa Rica to arrest me, to stop me. And then they tried to extradite me. Then Japan got involved. So I was under house arrest in Germany. And then they finally, I got a lot of sympathy from the German Ministry of Justice. In fact, one of them called me up and said on a Friday, so when you go into court, into the police station, I had to report every day, that you'll be arrested and extradited to Japan, not Costa Rica. And I said, oh, yeah, well, on Sunday, I left Germany. I skipped bail and went to Germany. I didn't have any papers, but I got on a boat that Sea Shepherd France, sailboat that Sea Shepherd France provided, sailed across to Nova Scotia, went ashore in Nova Scotia, Because I was raised on a border town, I easily got back into the United States. I crossed the United States, had our vessel, the Bridget Bardot, a fast trimaran, pick us up off Catalina Island, took that all the way to American Samoa, rejoined the Steve Irwin, and then went down to the Southern Ocean to confront the Japanese whaling fleet. But I didn't have any papers, so I really went more than halfway around the world without a passport or without even any driver's license or anything. But anyway, what happened is when I came back, after confronting the Japanese, I had to stay in exile in the South Pacific Islands, which really wasn't that bad, but for about 8 months until John Kerry allowed me to come back into the U.S. But I spent that time picking up garbage and plastic garbage in Tonga and Vanuatu and the Great Barrier Reef. The interesting thing about it, when I was on the Great Barrier Reef, Australia knew I was there, but they pretended that I wasn't there. They just didn't want to get involved.
Just absolutely mind-blowing. I'm going to ask you a question that is probably impossible to answer, but you have crossed the seas of our beautiful planet. Is there anywhere in particular that stands out to you in terms of pristine water, animal life, land?
Most beautiful place on this planet is Antarctica and the Southern Ocean waters around Antarctica. It's beautiful because it's virtually untouched by people. The animals like penguins and seals are not afraid of you. And in fact, when I was down there doing an interview for Animal Planet, there was some king penguins about 200 feet away. But when I wanted to keep a distance away from them, I didn't want to bother them. And I want to do the interview. The penguins come up right beside me and are looking in the camera. You know, they made the decision to come up. So no, and the icebergs, there's just no place on this planet more beautiful than Antarctica.
Goodness. When you were on your travel to get to Antarctica, where did you dock? Well, where did you release from? How long did it take you? What was the weather like? And what was the crossing like?
Well, we operated out of Australia and New Zealand primarily. And we had to run through there's a perpetual storms as you go down to the Southern Ocean. It's called the Roaring 40s and the Screaming 50s, you know, and like that. So you have to it's like you can see all these storms on the weather channels, and then you have to find a way through the storms, but you do get caught in them. And we had to do a rescue mission in McMurdo because the sailing boat was sunk, and we had to steer through this incredible storm with the water freezing around us. And we found the lifeboat and everything, but unfortunately we didn't find the crew. But again, the politics shows up, you know, because New Zealand Search and Rescue asked us to go in and do this. And we had our helicopter up. We found the thing. We found all this evidence and everything. We landed in McMurdo to refuel the helicopter and everything. And then the Minister of Foreign Affairs for New Zealand accuses us of illegally entering McMurdo Sound. And you know, he said you have to have 3 month, you have to apply 3 months in advance. I said, we were invited in by your search and rescue. And he said, well, because of that, we're not going to arrest you, but don't do it again.
Oh my goodness.
You know, so you have to deal with this petty political stuff all the time. But on the positive side is that the Australian Minister for the Environment, Ian Campbell, was very much against us in 2007, 2008. He was the representative to the International Whaling Commission, 2008. In 2009, the next year, he was our representative. You know, he completely changed over because, you know, he saw the facts and he changed. He's also no longer Minister of the Environment, but that always helped. But then Peter Garrett, who was the new Minister of Environment, you know, former lead singer for Midnight Oil, I think it was. He was the worst environment minister ever. You know, we thought he would be 100% on side, but no, he couldn't care less, you know. So whether, you know, celebrities, you can't count on them. They're either good or they're either bad, but he certainly wasn't good. Turned out later, I found out that he's a raving Jesus freak, and he just thought that was the Christian thing to do.
Goodness. Talking of celebrities, you mentioned the beautiful Bridget Bardot. I mean, such an iconic face and graceful beauty. That was so smart. You're such an obvious genius in many things at communications, clearly, understanding the psychology of the mass communication system that runs on the planet and the 4 columns that you mentioned earlier. Can you talk a little bit about the Aboriginal passport and what that is? I know Julian Assange has an Aboriginal passport.
Well, I have permission to fly the flag of the Five Nations of the Iroquois, and uh, I also have an Aboriginal passport. I also have the support of the Maori in New Zealand. And the problem is, the Iroquois were going to give me, the flag for the ship. They said, if you can't have a problem, we'll register it in the Mohawk Nation. But unfortunately, nobody recognizes that. That's one of I wrote a book on called The Clip of Whale. And I get criticized by Native people and supported by Native people because the whole objective of the book is that, there is no excuse for killing whales. It doesn't matter who you are. And when the Makah Nation in Washington State wanted to kill whales in 98 and 99, I opposed them. But I opposed them after being invited in by elders of the Makah Nation. And I think it was Alberta Thompson, one of the elders, she said, it's not part of our culture. Our culture is speaking our language or doing this or doing that. It's not taking a 50 caliber rifle and killing a whale. That's not part of our culture. But the U.S. government was supporting the whalers of the Makah whalers and everything. But we shut them down. But I came under a lot of criticism. Greenpeace was against it and everything. Came under a lot of criticism because I was accused of racism, which didn't bother me because I was a medic at Wounded Knee during the occupation of Wounded Knee by the American Indian movement. I've done more to fight for Native American rights than most Native American people. So I wasn't too concerned about their accusations. But, but these are just the things you have to stand up for the truth, no matter what people call you. The Mohawks, for my benefit, they called a council about that book because the Makah were calling me a racist. And I attended the council, but the Makah didn't attend. And so the Iroquois, the Mohawks actually said, well, the very fact that they didn't attend pretty much, predicts where our support lies. We're going with you because they didn't have the courage to attend the meeting. One of the things that a lot of people misconstrue is the fact that Native Americans are many tribes and many cultures, and they don't always agree. And some are very, very protective of the environment, and some are just there to sell out. And so we work with Native groups in, say, British Columbia to oppose salmon farms. We work with the Native groups to oppose whaling. But then again, we're at odds with Native people who want to kill whales or who want to kill seals and that. So it's, but my position on whaling is pretty, and the killing of cetaceans, dolphins, and everything is very straightforward. I am opposed to the killing of any cetacean, whale, or dolphin by any person anywhere in the world for any reason whatsoever. That's my position on that.
And a very strong and noble position indeed. I wanted to just go back a little bit because, again, as we're disclosing the true history and the goings on the oceans and the different works that you've done in the many countries and cultures that you've, been privy to, talking of the Aboriginal passport, it's a beautiful thing. A friend of mine, his name is Dr. Rainer Fulmich, and he's a German international lawyer we have to be careful of the verbals because there's such bullying going on, I call it boob tube, YouTube, boob tube, and they listen out for words. So if we say bad behavior against humanity, this is what my friend Dr. Rainer Fulmich goes against in many different layers and levels of our, current systems. And he has been using Maori law to get things passed through parliaments in Germany and England, for example. And I want to bring to attention the people that will watch this, that you having an Aboriginal passport, an Indigenous passport from my beautiful Aboriginal family, for him using the Maori law, as you yourself are aware of, that don't underestimate the power of the Indigenous families that have been here forever, because the arrogance of the common governments, forget and who they're up against, who the real humanity is here.
Well, I divide it this way. There's an anthropocentric culture and a biocentric culture. The anthropocentric culture has been slowly taking over the last 8,000 years. And the anthropocentric culture is identified as people who say it was all created for us. It's all about us. We're the only important species and that. Biocentric culture is we're part of everything. We should live in harmony with everything. I got a call from Brett Hume, as a reporter from the Fox News in the US. He said, "Did you say at a lecture that bees, trees, worms, and whales are more important than people?" I said, "Yes, I actually said that." I said, "How can you say something so outrageous? It's extremely unchristian." Well, I said it because bees, trees, worms, and whales are more important than people, and I can tell you why. They can live here without us, but we cannot live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. You don't live in a world without bees or worms or trees, and that's the reality of the situation. We are not superior. We are not dominant. We are part of that system. I actually created my own church. It's called the Church of Biocentrism and Interdependence. And just yesterday, I actually was talking with the daughter and wife of the late Chief Payakan in Amazonia, which I've been working with the Yanomami and the Kayapo since 1989. And so they understand that relationship, that we're part of everything and we're interconnected with everything. Like, well, I had a talk yesterday about something. Our entire evolution as a species is so 200 million years ago, there's something happened, and what that happened then is why we are here today. Flowers. We are all the children of flowers. And what I mean by that is that all the plants prior to 200 million years ago had a problem. How do we reproduce? You got to get the wind to do this and wind that. So plants developed a way to manipulate animals, literally manipulate them and include them in their sex life. So they created flowers and fruits. So in return for helping them reproduce, we get nectar and we get fruits. So we're actually being manipulated by the plants, but people don't really want to see it that way. But that's why I say we're the children of the flowers, because if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have ever evolved to be what we are today. And so again, it's you get an apple. Well, that apple is your reward for helping to distribute the pollen from the tree. So who's controlling who? The plants or the animals? But that's also evidence of the interrelationship, the interdependence. The three basic laws of ecology are the law of diversity. The strength of an ecosystem depends upon diversity of species within it. The second is the law of interdependence, that all the species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. The third is the law of finite resources. There's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity. When one species steals the carrying capacity of other species, that leads to diminishment of diversity and diminishment of interdependence, which leads to ecological collapse. Right now, we're in what's called the Holocene or the Anthropocene, which is the sixth major extinction in the history of the planet caused by us, one species. We're going to lose more species of plants and animals between 2000 and 2065 than we lost over the last 65 million years. And we're going to be responsible for that. But where does it come crashing down? If you look at the Earth as a spaceship, which is what it is, we're on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy, and every spaceship has a life support system. That life support system provides us with the food we eat, the air we breathe, and regulates climate and temperature. But that life support system is run by a crew of engineers. We humans, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time amusing ourselves, but we're not running the ship. Well, what we are doing is we're murdering engineers. We're killing them off. There's only so many engineers, the trees, the worms, the bees. There's only so many engineers that you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart and the life support system no longer can support anything. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton in the sea. 40% diminishment. And that can be looked up. There's an article in Scientific American in 2010, and it's got even worse since then. What does that mean? Phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen we breathe and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. If phytoplankton disappears from the sea, we die. We don't live on this planet without phytoplankton. Life will be altered completely. And yet most people aren't even aware of it. And that's why I always say, when the ocean dies, we die. So our very survival and existence is dependent upon protecting the ocean.
Yeah, incredible. Like you say, most people don't know any of what you've said. Most people don't understand the trees, the bees, and the worms. And yet, if we look at the people that run the planet, they are taking the trees, the bees, and the worms. And in the oceans, the plankton that you speak of, where we don't have an education. We're not educated en masse as a humanity to even know. Can you tell us what the plankton look like, where they multiply, and the animals that eat that plankton?
Well, the plankton are like thousands and thousands of species of plant life, aquatic plants, very small. but they're fed upon by zooplankton, and zooplankton are animal plankton. And zooplankton in turn supports whales and fish and others. It goes right up that pyramid. Now, why is phytoplankton being diminished? Because we're killing off the whales, the dolphins, the seabirds, and the fishes. We're diminishing them. And they are the species that provide the nutrient base for the phytoplankton. Phytoplankton to survive need nitrogen, they need iron, they need magnesium, and they get that from the feces of animals. So whales are basically the farmers of the ocean. One blue whale every day dumps 3 tons of manure onto the surface of the sea, which is eaten by the phytoplankton, which is eaten by the zooplankton. So that's the real role in the ecosystem of a whale, is to provide the nutrient base for phytoplankton. But again, most people aren't really aware of it, because we all have anthropocentric education. We believe that some God that we created gave this all to us to do whatever we want to do with it, and everything else is expendable. It doesn't matter. It's unimportant. And that's where the problem really lies. We think we're the most intelligent species on the planet, but we're not. We just defined what intelligence is. We define intelligence by hand-to-eye coordination and technology. If a blob of protoplasm steps out of a spaceship with a ray gun, no hesitation, that's intelligent. It's got a ray gun. But we don't understand non-manipulative intelligence. Whales don't need cars, they don't need clothes, they don't need telephones and things like that, but they have the largest and most sophisticated brains on the planet. The human brain is 1,700 cubic centimeters, a 3-lobe brain. The orca is a 6,000 cubic centimeter brain, a 4-lobe brain. The sperm whale is a 9,000 cubic centimeter brain, a 4-lobe brain. The convolutions on the neocortex are far more pronounced on whales and dolphins than they are on us. But, if you go into your biology 101, the professor will say, well, here's a rat, and here's a cat, and here's a monkey, and here's a person. And these are the brains. And you can see how the brain gets bigger as you go up towards the person. And the convolutions in the neocortex are more pronounced. They never put an orca up there. Makes us look really stupid. We don't like being looked stupid, so don't put that. I had a whaler in Norway. He said, hey, Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than people. How can you say it's just a stupid thing? I said, well, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with the natural world. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than we are. And he looked at me and says, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are. I said, George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. Cockroaches have been around for 500 million years. They're doing just fine.
Oh my God, the education of Captain Paul Watson. I just love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I would love to continue to talk to you about, but I know time is short, and but I'd love to have you back at some point in the future. Before we go, can I ask you, how would you advise the individual human to live their lives in terms of creating harmony? Because people at the moment are stressed out, strung out, hungry, terrified, this, that, and the other. But if they are to live in harmony on their planet, what would be the individual responsibility of a person?
I think people need to find out where their power lies. It doesn't lie in the past. You have no control over the past. It doesn't lie in the future. You have no control in the future. All of your power resides in the present. What you do each and every day in the present defines what the future will be. And to be an activist, well, the strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. Therefore, the strength of a movement is in diversity. And that depends on what people's skills and abilities are. Some people are lawyers, some people are teachers, some people are activists, some people, are different sort of things that they want to get involved in. As long as they do what they do best for the benefit of the planet, that's what makes the difference. And also, I try to advise young people. I said, don't let people to tell you you can't do anything. You can set your mind and do anything. One person can change the world. Because of Diane Fossey, we have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Because of David Wingate, we have the Bermuda Storm Petrel in Bermuda. Look what Greta Thunberg has been able to involve. It's individuals that make a difference. It's individuals that change the world. Governments don't do it. Governments just take credit for everything, but they don't really do anything. So and also don't get depressed, because again, your power is in the present. So don't get depressed about the future, and don't let people tell you can't do anything. The problem that we face is an impossible one. And how do you deal with an impossible problem? You find an impossible solution. And how do you find an impossible solution? Through the virtues of courage, passion, imagination, and resolve. 1972, The very idea that Nelson Mandela would one day be president of South Africa was absolutely unthinkable and impossible. And yet the impossible became possible. And there's so many examples of how of that.
Wow, wonderful. Wonderful. Your brain is so brilliant. If you were to describe yourself as an animal, who do you feel you'd be the closest representation of?
I've never actually thought about that. I'm a hominid primate. That's all I know. But I wouldn't presume to put my place in any other species. I certainly respect every other species, but we don't know what other species think. I don't know what whales think. I know they think. I know they dream. I know that they, they're capable of all the emotions that we are, but I don't really experience what they experience. And it's hard to experience what other people experience, really. You can
Yeah,
only go on, how you feel and how you view it.
that's true. Okay, I'll ask the question a different way. If you could choose to experience what it's like to be a particular animal, what would it be?
Again, I've never thought of that. I've never thought of that because it's a fictional thing that, it's, I have to give that some thought. I absolutely in my life have never thought about being another animal on that like this because I wouldn't presume to step into their shoes or fins or flukes or whatever.
Wow, wow, that's a beautiful response. Now, can you tell us how can we get in touch with you? How can people connect to Sea Shepherd, support this beautiful venture of yours and grow with you and grow in themselves?
Well, in the UK, it's the Captain Paul Watson Foundation UK. We have our website and everything, which is Paul Watson Foundation. And I got social networks. One of my Facebook pages has been shut down for a month because Sea Shepherd Glover is suing me for trademark violations for something that was posted 5 years ago. But they're just constantly harassing and harassing. It was a hostile takeover, and the only way to deal with it is to just adapt and move forward in another way. It's not going to, fighting with them is not going to get us anywhere. Basically, I got taken over by a Florida property developer who actually holds hunting fishing licenses in Alaska and Florida. And all his concern is power and control. So covertly, what he did was he registered the logos I designed and the name I created. He registered them in 75 different countries, and then said, "I own this." And that's the nature of it. It never occurred to me to own it. I created a movement. I didn't create an organization. So it never occurred to me to trademark this. But this guy went ahead and trademarked it, and then he said to everybody, I own this. So that was when last June when I left Sea Shepherd USA, I said, this is just immoral. I can't support it. And that's when he said, his exact words were, "You're a fucking employee. You do what you're told." And I said, I don't think so. So.
Wow, wow, good for you for standing up. Thank you for being such a beautiful example for us. Thank you for being the captain that you are, the commander of the seas, the fleets, the animals, the love that you have in your soul. I so respect you. I'm so honored that you've graced my channel. Seriously, I know you're too humble to probably accept that, but this is just so important to me. Like I said to you, I came across you 3 years ago and I've been trying to bring you to connection with me all that time in different ways. And here you are. And I know that you are going to bless the audience that watch you today. If I was to ask you to give your kind of last words in this broadcast to the audience, what would you say to them?
The one thing that I try to impress on everybody is to understand that if the ocean dies, we all die. Our very existence depends upon the survival of life in the ocean. So therefore, I think it's a responsibility of every one of us to do that. And maybe if I have time, I'd just like to explain what my concept of the ocean, because a lot of people identify the ocean as the sea, but the ocean's more than that. This is the ocean planet. It's water in continuous circulation. Sometimes it's in the sea, sometimes in ice, sometimes underground, sometimes in the clouds, and sometimes in the cells of every plant and animal on the planet. So the water in your body right now was once recently in flowers, was once recently in other animals' bodies, was once recently underground or in the ice. It's the continuous flow of water through everything that makes this the planet. So what is the ocean? We are the ocean. because the water flows through us. We are the ocean. And if people really understood that, I think then they'd understand that everything's interlinked. What you do in the atmosphere affects the sea. What you do in the sea affects the land. What you do in the land, affects the air. So it's all interconnected.
Wow, that is so beautifully put. And thank you. We got a real education today. Thank you for blessing us with your presence, Captain Paul Watson. I salute you and send you so much love.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, our ship is in Hull in Yorkshire right now.
You're what?
Our ship, the John Paul de Joria, is in Hull in Yorkshire right now.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's wonderful. Well, I'll make sure all your details and connections, newsletter, etc., that for people to find out more about your beautiful, work, the Sea Shepherd, that they can find out underneath this broadcast. And to you guys out there, thank you for being with us. I know you're going to love being introduced to Captain Paul Watson. For those of you who've never met him, seen him, now you know. I send you my love from my heart to yours, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.